Hello, I'm Loïc,
And I'm Marlon.
and we are here for another episode of FoME Friend. This is a series where we sit down with professionals in the medical engineering field. In this episode, we talk to Jenna Lyon, who's an R&D project engineer from Stryker.
We have a chat about her career progression from studying medical engineering at QUT through to delving into some of the specifics behind her role at Stryker. Enjoy the interview.
Hi, Jenna. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us for FoME Friend. So with these interviews, we like to start off with a bit of an off-topic question. And from some of our reliable FoME insiders, we've heard you've got a new Japanese Spitz puppy. So what are the challenges of looking after your new puppy while having to work from home?
Well, it's a great question. It has been interesting. So it's funny. We have a five-year-old dachshund, and I think you forget how hard puppy life really is. So you remember all the good times now that you have a well-trained dog. So I've been thrown back into the puppy stage. It gives me a small taste of what a lot of the people across the globe are probably dealing with, trying to have kids at home while working. So I have a constant second eye on the puppy, making sure that she's not chewing things that she shouldn't, or she isn't peeing or pooing in things in places that she shouldn't. So it's been an interesting challenge. So I'm looking forward to 2 years down the track when we have two well-behaved dogs.
I also hear that they're notoriously hard to toilet train.
We live in an apartment, so yeah, it's been a pain. So I mean, one of the things of moving down to Sydney is always that you sort of downsize. So we now live in a one-bedroom apartment on a third floor. So it certainly poses its own set of challenges trying to get the dog outside. So yes, no, it's been interesting. But she's in saying that, I would say she's very smart. So she's a bit cheeky, but she is learning things quickly. So hopefully, it won't be too much longer till she's ready to go.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah, in our old apartment block, we used to have people who used to order those little green turfs, and they would have little green turfs for the apartments. And
yeah, I think we're gonna have to switch to that. So we used to have we bought all this great puppy stuff when we had our first dog, and that's it. There's you can get this yeah, you're right. It's like turf, but then it kind of has this thing underneath it. And I think that's much better, because currently, as soon as we put puppy pads down, she likes to rip them up. So I think we're going to have to switch to another idea sometime soon.
So have you found with studying, was it more important to understand the medical engineering concepts or the broader engineering concepts and problem solving? What would you love to know, and what would be more useful? What was the most useful things you wish you learned at uni?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think it's something I probably struggled with a little bit when I started biomedical engineering as well. So and I think a lot of people in the course go through that, where should I do just a more general mechanical engineering degree, or should I go straight into biomed? I obviously went straight into biomedical. It was very much where I was interested in. It's where I wanted to be. I think across the board, I think if you did any kind of more general engineering and problem solving, I think it's super valuable. I think employers look at it really positively, knowing that engineers can sort of fit into a lot of different roles and use their problem solving skills. For me personally, the biomedical engineering is excellent. So a lot of I guess the knowledge that I use in particular is probably things like biomechanics and biomaterials, applies really closely to the work that I do with implants. And even my final year engineering project was around hip implants and modeling, doing computer modeling with them as well. So for me, the medical engineering subjects were actually really helpful. Things that I probably wish I learned, I knew a bit better now. I mean, we still did, I think, some project management skills at uni, but I think when you're doing them at uni, when you don't have that those practical projects to apply them to, that's something that I wish I remembered a little bit more now. So that's an area that I'm probably looking to upskill. But something that the engineering course still actually did cover. It was just sort of having that the tangible projects to apply that knowledge to at the time.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing that a lot of people can take away during their uni degree, is to really solidify those things and knowing that they're going to use it again. You also did VRes. So what was that process like, and what do you feel like you gained from this extra kind of experience?
Yeah, BRES is throwing me back a lot of years. It was definitely one of the probably the best opportunities that I had. I'd come across from UQ. I'd done 2 years of, or a year and a half in engineering at UQ, and then I decided to make the change to biomedical engineering at QUT. And so I was really focused on what I wanted to do, and I wanted to make sure that I was, getting the most work experience that I could. So one of my university super lecturers, I think at the time made the suggestion that QT was offering a vacation research scholarship. So it sort of put me out of my comfort zone a bit at that time, probably trying to connect with a lot of different, university supervisors in different departments, understanding the different research that they did and whether they were willing or had, a project for me to work on across the summer. So I think that was, at first, obviously a great way to kind of get to know the different people across the university and the areas they work in, which was great. And then I was able to kind of from there, pick an area that I was interested in, which is working across at IBI. And that led into my ongoing employment. So I did that in my first year of engineering, then I was able to get it again in the second year. But I was also fortunate that the research group was willing to keep me on a part-time basis. So I got a huge amount of experience in orthopedic research across my degree, as having it as my part-time job. So I don't know if it's a scholarship that's still offered, but I think it's excellent. It's a great way for students to get a real taste of what research is like as well. I think as medical engineers, a really key area that we go into is research. So it's a great way to kind of get a taste of that.
Yeah, so the BRES, it's still offered at QUT, and people can still undertake that. So it's good that the project's still going on there.
Awesome.
You went and did some external experiences like in India and the MAD program, I believe. What do you feel like those things gave you, and what did you enjoy about them?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I was really fortunate at the time that I was going through QT. We actually had an Engineers Without Borders, program for the medical engineering students. So we were able to send 2 students across to India for 2 6-week placements. And you went 2 years in a row, and it was awesome. And I think anyone that's interested in EWB, something for me, I was always interested in how engineering skills could be applied in the development setting. But I always felt it was a little bit challenging, right? So when you look at EWB, a lot of the projects that they offer tend to be very, based in either environmental engineering or civil engineering. And I really wanted to know how we could use our skills to, improve, products in the developing community. So that was an excellent opportunity. EWB, that placement, you're also working really directly with clinicians and with patients to understand what their needs were. So it's all about appropriate design. So it was a great experience, both from an engineering perspective, but also just kind of learning how to deal, in a really different environmental setting as well.
Cool. So going on from that, after you graduated, you decided to take a year off and travel. How important do you think that was to you before you transitioned to the workforce?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's certainly something I recommend very, very highly. I mean, people don't have to travel if that's not something that you're interested in, but having a bit of that break was really important for me. So as I mentioned, I'd sort of come across from UQ. So by the time I had actually graduated engineering, I'd actually been 6 years at uni. And I think I really needed that mental break. And it's a really sort of unique opportunity that you have between uni and work, is to take some of that time. If you get into the workforce and you get into a company that you like, often it's harder to find that time as you get older to take that break and to step away from your career. And I think, when I've talked to people about this as well, I think sometimes people can get concerned, or maybe they don't have enough experience under their belt. So if they take the time off, if you take 6 months, 12 months off just after uni, is it going to be harder to get a job when you get back? And certainly from my perspective, not at all. I mean, I think if you've built up some good relationships throughout your university degree, no employer is going to look, on that sort of time off in a negative way. I think if not, they'll look at it in a positive way, that you've gone out and you've, explored the world, matured a little bit probably as well. But yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing is more, it's the opportunity. I think it's harder to find, that time in life to take that kind of break. So, when you're finishing something big, like a university degree, I think it's a really nice time to have a break and have a breather. And it just means you sort of, by the end of the holiday as well, I was ready to use my mind. I was ready to get back into it and really focus on my career. So for me, it was a really good choice.
So after you finished your travels, you started a sales role with Stryker. Do you mind telling us a little bit like what you did in that sales role, what you enjoyed the most, and what challenges you had?
Yeah, so I was a sales rep for hip and knee replacements. And what's interesting about sort of medical sales rep, it's very different to what you generally expect when you say salesperson. Certainly a lot larger part of my role was the clinical aspect. So again, I was in theatre, essentially 5-6 days a week, supporting hip and knee replacements. So making sure that the surgeons and the nurses had the instruments and implants that they needed, and I was there sort of as a subject matter expert. What I really enjoyed about it was being in the hospital every day. I love connecting with different people, so it was great, great opportunity to go to a lot of different hospitals. No day was really the same. And I think some of the challenging cases, so a primary hip and knee replacement is fairly straightforward. Surgeon may do 7 of those in a day, and they don't need a whole lot of guidance on how to use your instrument platform because they're probably quite familiar with it. So where the real challenge came in is the complex revisions. So that's where you're often partnering with the surgeon a lot closer to sort of preoperatively plan the case. And again, then in these complex revision cases, sometimes these surgeons may only do 1 or 2 of these a year. So that's where your skills and your knowledge and making sure that you know your products really well, you can add value in that operating theatre. And I think that's something that's really cool. I think the things that I probably didn't like as much was the sales aspect. I love communicating with people. As I said, I love building relationships. So that's why I wanted to see whether sales would be something that fitted with me. And overall, it just wasn't something that I was passionate about. So, I think you want to always work in an area that you are passionate about, that you feel, I guess, engaged to succeed. And I did love my job, but I didn't love the sales part. So I sort of knew within a couple of years that I was building some great skills, but that I definitely wanted to go back to the engineering side of things and see how I can apply those skills as well.
Cool. That's really interesting. So in your sales role, were you accountable for doing any risk analysis on the surgeries being implemented in patients?
No, not at all. So, and even now, I don't know if our engineers specifically would. I mean, you would undertake a risk analysis if you were doing the development of a new product, but no, not on a daily basis. So it was more just a matter of making sure that that the implants and instruments were there and talking them through the procedural steps if they needed help. That was a big part of it. And also, actually, I think, sorry, just to add to that as well, on the sale, I think that was a really big aspect of where my medical engineering background actually fed in. So, to understand your product really well, I needed to understand biomechanics. I needed to understand biomaterials. I still read a lot of clinical research around our products, so you could have a certain level of conversation with the surgeons. So it's interesting how much I felt I used a lot of that engineering knowledge that I got through my degree in my sales role as well.
Cool. So one of the questions we've had come through was, how has working in a sales role encouraged you to think differently as an engineer, and how has this helped you in your R&D role, aside from the better clinical knowledge from being in the theatre, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. So the clinical knowledge is a massive difference. So I still work very heavily in hip and knee replacements. There's just now on the development side. And so the fact that I've seen probably 1,000 hip and knee replacement surgeries with a lot of different surgeons means I understand the products and the procedures really well. But I think a really big part of the sales role was about building communication skills and working with surgeons. So I still do a lot of that now. I have to connect with our sort of key opinion leaders to get feedback on research and development work. So that's really helpful. And I think the other part was what sales is meant to be about is I guess a lot of listening and effective questioning. So I think, when you sometimes typically think about sales, you think about someone doing this big pitch, but really what sales is meant to be about is understanding the user's concerns, and, questioning them in such a way to pull that information out. And it's interesting how much of that you should be using as an engineer as well. So if you're trying to improve a product or create a new product, you need to be able to understand, to listen to the surgeons as to what they need. You need to be able to question them effectively around it. Even myself, I really have to catch myself working on a new design. I may have an idea of what that design should look like. And I always have to sort of peel that away and try and make sure I'm asking the right questions to the surgeon to really understand what it is that they want. So it's interesting. I think there's been a lot of skills and sort of knowledge that I've taken away from the sales world that's more than just the clinical aspect.
So now you're in your R&D role with Stryker. What does an average workday look like for you?
Yeah, so our R&D team here is quite small. It's growing at an exciting pace, I would say. Since when I started Stryker, our R&D team consisted of one person, which was my boss, and he's been in that role for a long time. And since then, we've seen our team grow quite significantly. I say significantly, it's about 5 people here down in Australia, but we expect that to continue to grow, which is great. But what that means is, that I actually do a lot of my work with overseas teams. So kind of my daily, what a day may look like is I'm often on calls quite early in the morning connecting with the US. I may be on calls later in the afternoon or evenings connecting with the EU. And then sometimes quite late into the evening if I'm connecting with both the EU and US all at the same time. My work, I don't do any laboratory work. So my work is definitely more of a mixture of sort of project management. It's a lot of looking at clinical research as well. So, the key area that I sort of focus on is understanding how we can improve patient outcomes through, in the positioning of a knee replacement. So to do that, we need to set up the right clinical research to answer some of those questions. And then I also still do a lot of work with surgeons as well. So on some of the development work, if we are, building certain prototypes, I need to work with the surgeon. So that may be like some video conference calls as well to get some direct feedback around the direction that we're taking.
So you mentioned prototyping there. What kind of methods do you use to prototype like the little projects you're working on? Do you use like office equipment to build small scale models, or do you use like computational modeling to move forward?
Yeah, so it depends on the project that I'm working on. Some of the projects I work on is, instrument design, and we partner with some local vendors on that. So that would be more like, mocking something up in CAD and potentially getting it 3D printed and getting the surgeon to assess that, whether that be sort of just visually showing them and getting their feedback, or it may be using it in a cadaver lab. Some of the other work that I'm doing is more software based. And so I'm not necessarily, I don't have software skills from a degree. It's not something that we sort of learnt so much. So what I would be doing is generally partnering with someone to build the software framework or the prototype, and I give a lot of the clinical feedback around what the inputs and outputs of that needs to look like.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really interesting. You also mentioned about how you have phone calls a lot with the US and the other different departments of Stryker around the world. How have you guys been impacted with everything going on with COVID? Like for you guys, has it been big changes for you guys, or has it been more or less the same?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about if I was in my previous role where I was obviously in theatre every day, with the fact that elective surgery was stopped for quite a while, that would have been a very big change in my role. Whereas in this role, as I said, so much of my work I can do on a computer, so much of the work that I do is connecting with teams overseas, that a lot of it's been, business as usual from that perspective. One thing that I have noticed that is I feel like as we've all been forced to go into a more virtual world, a lot of the teams from overseas, everyone's more open to using video chat. And that's probably the biggest thing I've noticed is how much more valuable it is connecting with video than just audio, and being able to sort of chat and build relationships that way has been really helpful. It's been good. It's been an adjustment. I think the other challenge that we'll continue to see is sort of the brainstorming. So I think that's where it's really valuable having in-person meetings if you really want to hold a good brainstorming session. But again, the teams that I would generally do that with are overseas. So that problem, that challenge is still there regardless of COVID or not sometimes. So I think it's about finding new creative ways to run meetings like that. And I think what's great is, again, I think everyone's kind of getting a lot more familiar with online tools that can help run some of those meetings.
So with designing hip and knee replacements, what are like the key things for you guys to consider?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess a big part of what you have to consider is, and this is something I probably, again, picked up from a lot of my clinical experience, is the different ways in which a surgeon may want to use an implant or just their own philosophy. So if you look at, say, a primary hip or knee replacement, the steps are in a surgical guide, they're the same 8 steps, but the way that one surgeon will do those steps as opposed to another, there's always these slight nuances that impact the way that they use the products and the way that they want to, I guess, how they want the surgery to flow. So I think that's been a big consideration for me, is trying to make sure when you are designing hip and knee replacements or making product improvements, it's, making sure that you are getting diverse feedback to make sure that your product is, I guess, valuable to the masses, and you're not designing for a really key sector of people.
Cool. So, now that you're in an R&D role, what kind of resources do you use for keeping up with how the rest of the industry is progressing?
Yeah, I think this is a good question, and it's probably something I could be doing better. I mean, I think working in hip and knee replacements quite specifically, I think we naturally hear a lot about what our companies that are doing the same in this kind of space where they're at and where their products are focused. So I think we keep up to date that way. I think more broadly in terms of medical engineering across the board, probably LinkedIn, I would say, and even probably from a competitive standpoint as well. I think LinkedIn, there's a lot of good information. It's easy to read and to digest. And then the other one's probably the College of Biomedical Engineers as well, would be a good space to get that information.
Cool. Are there any colleges in New South Wales that you're a part of, the college? Because I know up here in Queensland we've got the college,
It's a
state branch.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm not part of any colleges down here. We had looked to see if we could connect with the EWB chapter down here, but I haven't necessarily looked at whether we have a New South Wales chapter of the College of Biomedical Engineers. So it's interesting. I guess when you move states, up in Queensland, you sort of, going through university up there, you sort of know a lot of these people, and that's sort of how you get to understand that these groups exist. So I should probably do a little bit more investigating down here, because I think that'd be a great way to meet people in different companies and different parts of the industry.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for taking the time to have a chat with us. And to end it, would you have any advice that you'd give to a biomedical engineering student going forward if they wanted to try and follow in your footsteps down the R&D route, or even to a sales role?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, like what I always say, is kind of when you're coming out of your degree, it's trying to have an idea of what you want to get to. Like, what does your future dream job look like? And, realistically, you're not going to get that dream job straight up. So it's, what are the skills that you can build to get there? And for me, from my perspective, that's where, when I took the sales job, the reason that I wanted to take it was because it was in a company that I wanted to be in. And I was able to learn more, more clinical knowledge that I knew would be helpful for where I wanted to go in future in terms of research and development. So I think that's the biggest part is really kind of having that understanding of where you want to be, but also knowing that you're not going to get there straight up. So it's making, I guess, strategic decisions when you come out of university of, the types of roles or jobs or companies that are going to help you get to where you want to be in the long term.
Cool. Well, thanks again for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. As at any time, and if you guys have any more questions, please just let me know. I'm happy to help.
Good luck with the dog paint.
Yeah. Oh God. I was like, I don't know if you could hear through that video, but I definitely had the dog barking like outside the room. So
definitely a real challenge.
Once again, a massive thank you to Jenna for calling in to have a chat with us today. And if you're curious to hear a bit more about Stryker, make sure to follow them on LinkedIn to hear more about their products and potential opportunities.
If you have any further questions for Jenna, feel free to comment them below or send them through to the FoME Facebook page. And don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode. See you next time.